Steve's got better taste in beer than Manser. Hate to be that guy, it's true though.
Test, test.
All right. There you go. So feel free to call in for any questions.
Sure. Thanks for coming tonight. My first song. I'm just kidding. Let's go. My first song tonight I wrote back in 2004, and just kidding. What's up, guys? Hey, what's going on? I recognize you.
Well, I'll start. Nick Halligan, Wrestling Inc. Joe, you were easily one of the hottest free agents before Impact picked you up. Talk to us a little bit about why Impact, why now, why?
I really, really, really enjoy. I mean, I probably use the word love the independent wrestling scene. It's where I thrive. It's where it's where I really get motivated. And the fact that Impact offered me a deal that was non-exclusive, and I could still do the independent scene, that was probably the most appealing part to it. Because I don't think I ever want to give that up.
And when you say non-exclusive, that would rule out other major entities like AEW?
I think, I'm exclusive as far as national television. So, like, even stuff like Championship Wrestling from Hollywood with Dave Marquez, who I've worked for 15 years now, like, I could still do that because that's regional television. So Impact offered me a deal that was only exclusive to national television,
okay.
which meant I can still do, a lot of the independents that I really, really enjoy.
Okay, cool, awesome, thank you.
Now that you've landed in Impact, who are some of your dream opponents for the year 2020?
In Impact?
Yes.
Oh man, I've done a lot of intergender wrestling, and Impact really embraces intergender wrestling. So, I'd like to do some stuff with the knockouts in the knockout division, because I think there's a whole, at least my experience from the independent wrestling, there's a whole audience that really wants to get behind that, and I think you see it now with like superhero movies and things like that, television shows where, they have these strong, powerful female characters, and I think that is starting to blend and lend itself well to the world of wrestling. And so, without pinpointing any specific wrestlers, I think just being able to do something different on television like intergender wrestling would be very cool for me. Yes.
Since you've been such a big proponent of the intergender stuff, what are your thoughts on Tessa challenging Sammy tomorrow, and who's your pick for winner?
I love it because it's history either way, just for her to have the title shot. I've known Tessa for a while now, and, I've known Sammy for a while now too, but, Tessa is a great wrestler to have, to carry that flag, for me personally, and I'm a little bit biased, but my old tag team partner Candice LeRae is the best intergender wrestler I've ever witnessed. But she's not where she's at now. She's not allowed to do that. So I think Tessa being the face of intergender wrestling is really, a good place for it. She's a good representative of it. And personally, just because I think of what it will do for the industry, I believe, or I'm rooting for Tessa at least. I'm hoping she wins.
Thank you.
Brandon Reynolds for thechairshot.com. You talked about having just a lot of fun in your career right now. Impact's doing some really fun things on TV. I specifically wanted to ask you about the Wrestler's Court segment from a few weeks ago. You played the voice of reason in that particular segment. Was that something that you set up, or especially with you being really synonymous for being really just fun, but being outside of the box, how was it being the voice of reason within that particular segment?
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why I think people really enjoyed that segment. It's because it was a different side of me. I'm usually the zany, offbeat character, and to play the straight guy in the comedy scene was different for me. So, but I enjoyed it, and it was just it's one of those things where you got Johnny Swinger, who's arguably even more zany than I am. So it's about and I use this analogy a lot in my wrestling matches. Is my matches are better when they're played off someone else's character. Like, I can go out and do my signature stuff, and it could be a Joey Ryan match, but to play off different characters where you don't expect you don't know the reaction where you see like with Ken Shamrock, like how are these two going to coexist? People want to see that, and it's and to do it with Johnny Swingers like takes a different side of it, and like you said, it puts me on the opposite side, which I haven't done a lot of, at least in recent years. So I think that was cool, and I think that's why people really took to it, because they didn't know what to expect, and I think it was written well, first of all, and second of all, I think like everybody hit their I guess characters well.
So, you've been a long-time standard bearer for intergender wrestling advocate. Where does that originate from you? Where does that come from originally?
I have to probably say it goes back to training Candace and training with Candace, and watching her grow as a wrestler. Just to it was such a big part of her inspiration. Like she grew up wanting to be the Macho Man, Randy Savage. She didn't grow. I mean, she had female heroes in wrestling, but she grew up, having the same heroes as me and having the same heroes as a lot of other people. She didn't specify genders, and so when she transitioned into wrestling and started wrestling for herself, I just saw that she was never concerned about being put in any certain category, and I think that really inspired me, and I think a lot of people too. Obviously, early in the '90s, it was a little more the less PG era. There was a little more of intergender wrestling going around, but as far as just not making intergender like a sideshow, not making it like a special attraction, just being like, here's two wrestlers, they're going to wrestle. I thought that was really cool, and that's something that. Again, I mentioned you see it in a lot of media, these different movies, TV shows, you see that now, and I think it's really the next step for professional wrestling.
And you mentioned styles that kind of work off you. Who are some of your favorite opponents where the styles to you make sense, whereas the fans might kind of tilt their head and say, really?
In recent years, that's a good question, because you can find differences in just about everybody, and instead of like ignoring them or trying to find common ground, exploiting the differences. Like even last night when I wrestled Michael Elgin, we obviously different characters, different styles of wrestling, and instead of trying to hide the differences, let's exploit them, let's play them up. Obviously some of my favorite opponents I've ever had, the Young Bucks, or Generation Me when they were in Impact. They're more of a high-flying, kind of, they're more spectacle-oriented. I'm more character-based, and just that blending those two things, I think really worked well for us.
To kind of piggy off his question, I have to say one of those matches probably happened in D.C. not too long ago. That really sent the internet up. But you've had a lot of success in different genres of media. Netflix, we can say, is one. You just presented your book at San Diego Comic-Con. Obviously, in Impact Wrestling. Obviously, in independent wrestling with Bar Wrestling. Where do you see yourself? Because you seem to be always creating different projects. You always are starting to just always broaden the margins for everything. What can we expect from you on that notion for 2020?
I don't know about 2020 specific, but I do like learning new avenues in different parts of the industry. Very early in my career, me and 5 other people, we started Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and so we started kind of learning that side of it, but it was a group effort. So when I started bar wrestling, it was more because I wanted to learn that side, or at least be more in charge, or be more like, I guess, like just to learn how to do that on my own, so that I would have that skill, without having to rely on other people or without having to divvy up the jobs. I've been getting a lot of seminars lately, which I don't necessarily like teaching and training, but I think it's a good skill to have. Learning patience with beginners is tough for me. I'm not as easygoing as I seem. I'm not great with patience. But it's something that if I all of a sudden can't wrestle, it's a good skill to have. Agenting matches, having other people ask me my opinions, or helping them with what they've been given. Those are good skills to have, and those can lead to a life in wrestling after I'm done in the ring.
And one other question too with that. Again, you seem to really be creative on just, making the margin bigger. You always seem to figure out a way to just make money. Have you ever thought about maybe branding the lollipop at all?
I get asked that a lot. Like, oh, why don't you sell lollipops at the merch table? And honestly, really, it's because the margin of profit isn't great. You can only they'll take up a lot of room in my bags that I pack.
Yeah.
And I won't be making I'll have to sell 100 of them to see really the same profits I'll make off of 8x10 or t-shirts. So like the rate, maybe that's something to look into as far as like special orders where I can mail out. I don't have to carry them with me, but
I would even say outside of wrestling, I think your name transcends out of just the genre of professional wrestling. You're a household name, like I say, with Netflix and everything.
yeah, sometimes a lot of like people, oh, why? Because Blow Pops is my preferred brand. Like, why doesn't Blow Pop sponsor you? And I'm fairly certain. I've never talked to anybody. I'm fairly certain they probably don't like what I do with them.
Fair.
So that's probably why.
Do you feel like there might be a working relationship between bar wrestling and Impact in the future? Maybe seeing stars that you've worked with, like Heather Monroe, Eli Everfly, coming over to Impact?
I mean, just today we're downstairs. We're having a lot of the local guys, on the show wrestling in front of for an Impact event. So I definitely think there's a possibility. Impact in recent years has definitely been partnering up with whatever area they're in, whatever the local independent scene. They're very accepting of independent wrestling and truthfully, honestly, not just saying it, not just lip service, but really trying to give the local talent, the unseen wrestlers, a spotlight and I guess like scouting them for future possibilities, future openings, and I think they've really accepted that, and I think that's good for them, and that's good for the brand, and it's good for the independent scene. So I definitely think there's some stuff in the future we can do together.
One more question. You bring up the blow pop, would maybe not want to be associated with your brand. Obviously, what your finishing move is fairly controversial. Do you ever come across wrestlers that are reluctant to work with you or do that move, and how do you handle that?
Not really. I mean, it's never mandatory. Do you know what I mean? There's ways to work around everything. Most like so. So the first time I wrestled Cody Rhodes, he was just off WWE TV, and I thought for sure there's no way he's going to want to do this. And first thing he said to me is like, "How do we get into this?" Because he said the crowd's going to want to see it, and we have to pay it off, or else we're ripping the fans off. And that attitude, and when he said that, it kind of hit me a little bit. Like people know that the audience wants to see this, and people want to pay it off for the audience, which is nice. So I haven't had too much trouble, but again, it's wrestling. We can work around stuff. We can make stuff up as we go along. We can, tease it and take it. When I was doing stuff with the MLW, they didn't want it on their television show. So what we would do is, I'd wrestle MJF, and after the match was over, after the beauty shot, they'd fade out, and then we would do it post-match, so the live audience would still get it. So there's ways to work around it when there's roadblocks up.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Since we're talking about the spot, I got a two-pronged question for you. One is, talk us through convincing Ken Shamrock to do it, and then what's the strangest reaction you've gotten either from a fan or a family member or even someone else in the business to that spot?
So it was actually Impact that approached Ken about doing it. So it was a little easy for me. But he told me, he said, they showed it to him, and he said, I get it. I think it's funny. I'm just not sure it works for Ken Shamrock. So he went home to think about it, and he asked his kids, what do you think about this? And apparently his kids are big fans of mine, and they were like, Dad, if you do this, it would be the coolest thing ever. So that convinced him to do it, which I think is a good analogy for the spot in general, is that a lot of the old guard's not sure about it, but the younger generation of fans and wrestlers really, they get it. So I think that's a good description of the move itself. And what was the second part of that?
What was the most surprising reaction you got from someone, even if it's not someone from the business, family or friends, to seeing the spot?
I found that a lot of, at least when the spot first went viral, it was a lot of, you know, even whether they're friends that were wrestling fans or other wrestlers, they would say, you know, my aunt knows that I wrestle and she sent me this clip. And she, you know, just because she knew that they were involved in wrestling. So I got a lot of outside attention, like a lot of outside wrestling attention. And then all the people that are in wrestling are getting bugged about it because all the people, this is wrestling. Oh, I saw this wrestling clip. But I guess that's not too unusual as far as viral clips. I think it's always fun to get, like, when wrestling fans bring their friends who don't know it or don't even watch wrestling to get their reaction, because it's so, like, genuine about the whether they find it funny or curious or stupid or whatever. That reaction is always the best, because they don't have any preconceived notion about wrestling. They're not passionate about wrestling. They're not diehards. They don't live and breathe. They don't go home and tweet about wrestling. It's really just a genuine person's reaction to seeing something as, I guess, zany or offbeat as that is. So those are the reactions I like the best.
So you've created this like modern blueprint for professional wrestling, where you've been able to be signed with a major company, but also continue on the independent scene, run your own promotion, do a lot of creative projects, and just have a character that you know, traditional wrestling fans probably never thought would exist. So I think, out of just curiosity, do you think that this is leading into wrestling into the future, that there is going to be more people who can do the things that you do, or do you feel like you're the exception to the rule?
No, I definitely think, and it's if you look at the history of wrestling, there's always, no matter what the change is, there's always backlash to it from the previous generation. You know, I remember, because I was, you know, a teenager at the time, when, like, Steve Austin, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Steve Austin, but when he came up, you know, like, I knew a lot of traditional wrestling fans that were like, how is this guy who's flipping people off and cursing the good guy? And they didn't understand it, because that's not traditional pro wrestling. But wrestling evolves, and you either evolve with it or it passes you by. So there's, no matter what it is, there's a chance for it to connect with an audience if it's done well, or if it finds an audience, or if it finds, you know, whatever it needs to grow. There's always that opportunity, because wrestling is, you know, it's part sport, but it's also part theater, and it's part art. So there's always the chance to get an audience, you know, no matter what the shtick is. But I find that anything that's different and anything that changes, there's always going to be backlash from a certain section of traditional whatever that is in that industry. You know, like Martin Scorsese blasting Marvel movies. Marvel movies are super popular, and they found their audience, obviously, but there's a certain generation that doesn't see it.
This will be the last question.
So, how do you, over the course of your career, I asked this Eddie Edwards earlier, how do you keep yourself fresh, considering people say you work a safe style, even though you kind of surprise people with some of the bumps you take? How do you keep yourself in your longevity? How do you keep yourself fresh? What's your number one kind of way to recover?
It's probably not the best example, but it works for me. So this is me specific. Eddie Edwards probably can't give you the same answer. I find that, so later in my wrestling career, I started getting inspired by different people that you wouldn't expect. And one of them was Andy Kaufman, in the way that he can manipulate an audience, in the way he can, you know, not just his wrestling, but his comedy as well. And so, if I'm going to be a polarizing figure no matter what, because of what I do, no matter what I say, no matter what I do. But if I rest on that, then it goes away. So I just, even if even if it's controversy for the sake of being controversial, I have to find a way to create controversy because that's what keeps my name. Like I'm doing this press conference with you guys, but there are people arguing about me on Twitter right now. I promise you.
Yeah.
It's not maybe so I just have to find ways to just do something that will spark interest or spark debate. In a lot of that times I have to. What looks like it's just like an offbeat comment from me or a segment or something that I do. It's actually planned because it's like I'm planting a seed of controversy that I know will grow. And that's just being a polarizing figure. Polarizing figures got to polarize, So if I just rest, then I'll go away. And so that's what keeps the interest in me. That's stuff that's not even wrestling related. So, but that's the world we live in now is social media, and it plays a huge part in everything we do. So, finding a way to work, and there's no science to that either. I mean, social media is relatively new, so people are still figuring out how to work it or use it to advance their careers. So that's all trial and error too. Because I could do something that tries to be controversial, and if I word it the wrong way, it could really be damaging to me. So I have to really be careful, even within the controversy that I want to create.
You mind posing for a photo now?
$20.
There's that indie spirit.
It's 15.